In 1 Timothy 3:16, in the King James Bible, it says, God was manifest in the flesh. In modern translations, it simply says, He who was manifest in the flesh. And that sounds, you can build a real conspiracy on that. That sounds like those rascally modern translators. Right?
1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 in your King James Bible says that God became flesh, because that's what some people believe, that's what they wrote. Ancient manuscripts do not say that. Ancient manuscripts have been discovered where in a different ink, people have put just a dot on the bar to change from He became flesh, meaning Jesus became flesh, to God became flesh, to make the Bible agree with the later belief. Ladies and gentlemen, let us make our belief agree with what God revealed in all of His holy scriptures. Let us not change the scriptures to fit us, but let us change to fit God's true teachings. Let us seek the real Jesus tonight.
James claimed that no one can, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, no one can add anything into the Bible or add any word to make Jesus God. There is a black and white piece of evidence here in front of us, where someone came and changed the word to God. The original verse was, who was made manifest in the flesh, and then it was changed to God made manifest in the flesh. So much with James' textual criticism.
He started off by showing the inserted reading of theos, 1 Timothy 3:16. If you're going to debate someone and they've provided you with information, you might want to, take a look at what they've provided to you. This is a subject that I've addressed many times. In the earliest manuscripts, and what's called the unsealed text, the majuscule, the original manuscripts of the New Testament written in all capital letters, no punctuation, no space between words. Lots of fun to read. Now, in those capital letter forms, the early Christians developed something called the nomina sacra, the sacred names. They would actually use abbreviations to try to get more onto a page. Most of the early Christians were poor people. And in fact, remember, the church was under persecution for the first 300 years of its existence. You couldn't go to the rich people to have nice manuscript copies made at that particular point in time. And so they would use these abbreviations for like God, Jesus, Spirit, common words. They would abbreviate them as one or two letters and put a line over top of them. God was one of the words that they did this with. Now, when we hear the difference between God and He who, that sounds like a big difference. But I'd like to show you something on the screen that shows you what the difference between these two words is. If we could bring that up, you'll be able to see that in the original language, the term God is two letters, and the word He who is two letters. There you can see it. I'm not sure if the audience can see it. But you can see the term God, theta sigma with a line on top, and then omicron sigma is hos. The only difference between these two words are two little lines. And remember what you're originally writing on. Papyrus, which is made up of leaves that are pressed together, crossed like this, or leather manuscripts, vellum, all of which have what in them? Lines. And you're reading somebody else's handwriting. It's very easy to understand. No reason for conspiracies here. It's very easy to understand why someone would misunderstand or misread someone else's handwriting. And at the bottom of that screen was a shot from Codex Sinaiticus. And you can see that its original reading was hos, and then about 700 years later, someone had written theos in above it. And you can see that its original reading was hos, and then about 700 years later, someone had written theos in above it. You can see it in the second line toward the end, where someone has made an emendation about 700 years after the original. And in fact, I have a feeling that the graphic actually came from my website. I certainly have posted it many times and have discussed the variant reading, and it has nothing to do with what I said. What I said was, if someone wanted to come along and take the New Testament that didn't teach the deity of Christ and try to insert it, they wouldn't be able to do so because of the distribution of the manuscripts. We can recognize the 7th century hand in Codex Sinaiticus because we know what the 4th century reading was. It was hos, not theos. We know that because we have so many manuscripts that are widely dispersed. That's the point. I can't make you hear that. I can't make you understand what I'm saying, but there are people here tonight that do understand what I'm saying. So look at Surah 158. Here is a variant that's found in Surah 3158. Let's sort of blow it up here so you can see it. Here's the text under consideration, which speaks of Allah surely gathering those who die to himself. Here is the same text from Quranic Manuscript 328, which is found in the National Library of France in Paris. It is dated to around 100 years after Hijrah. But as reading Hijazi text is hard even for those who read modern Arabic, let's expand the text out a little bit so you can see it. Now, what you can see is that the Paris manuscript has an extra aleph, not found in the modern printed Quranic text. But in this case, that extra aleph completely changes the meaning. In the ancient text, it says those who die will not be gathered to Allah, while the modern 1924 printed text, which I would imagine most Muslims in the audience have, says that they will surely be gathered to Allah.
Extra alif. Can you believe that? Extra alif. This is just crazy textual criticism. I'm not even going to address that. Extra alif and waw and fa.
If you pray, God will reward you. Is that different than if I say, if you pray, God will not reward you? Is there sort of a difference between those two statements? I show you a variant in the Quran with an extra aleph, and you all go, ha 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 ha. But the difference is between you will be gathered or will not be gathered. That's a 180-degree difference. Laughter is not a refutation, my friends. Laughter is a refutation for the unthinking, not for the thoughtful.
You mentioned a variant reading, and it clearly states, will we go to God or we will not go to God? And you said, you're suggesting that it is a variant reading. However, if you look at other manuscripts, which are, I'm very sure, going to make the picture clear, this clearly appears to be a scribal error.
Which I thought was why the New Testament was corrupt, because we do the same thing. We can recognize the 7th century hand in Codex Sinaiticus because we know what the 4th century reading was. It was Hos, not Theos. We know that because we have so many manuscripts that are widely dispersed. That's the point. And you can see that its original reading was Hos, and then about 700 years later, someone had written Theos in above it. You can see it in the second line toward the end. Which is found in the National Library of France in Paris. It is dated to around 100 years after Hijrah.
Okay, when we die, where do we go? We go to God. And if the verse is saying, when we die we don't go to God, then what does logic tell you? Logic tells you, a child will tell you, that this is a scribal error. It is a scribal error. When we look at the other manuscript of the same verse, time is up. Okay, go ahead.
Let me respond to what Adnan just said. He just engaged in textual criticism. What if you didn't have other manuscripts? What if you were just reading the Paris manuscript, that very early manuscript of the Quran? That assumed a certain understanding of what gathering together means. There, in biblical language, being gathered together to God can be for judgment or for life. So you see, you've now taken your theology And you've taken the other manuscripts and you've done textual criticism, which I thought was why the New Testament was corrupt, because we do the same thing. We know that because we have so many manuscripts that are widely dispersed.
Okay, when we die, where do we go? We go to God. And if the verse is saying, when we die we don't go to God, then what does logic tell you? Logic tells you, a child will tell you, that this is a scribal error.